Hey, welcome back to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. I'm your host, Coach Zach. I'm here with Coach Zach and Sweet as Candy, Coach Brandy.
Hello.
What's up, guys?
What's up?
Happy Tuesday to you both.
You too?
Yeah. It's the Tuesdayest Friday I've ever had. It's a busy week already.
Yes, it is.
Cranking. All right, we got a good topic for people today. I'm super excited about this one. I think I'm always excited about all of our topics, but this one comes up a lot in conversation. So today we're talking about, is Pilates good for fat loss? Yes or no? So before we do that, I want to give a little shout out to a client of the week. So we're going to go with Miss Jeanette Lane this week. It is week 9 of her 9-week transformation. And she's done awesome. There have been some ups and downs, just as far as like she's seen some frustration and some things, and struggle with a few things. But overall, she's crushed it.
She has.
And if I think about where she started and just where she, what she had going on in her life, and, very high performing executive, COO of a company, and very high stress environment, and hadn't really prioritized her health for a while. And then to go from that to who she is now and how her priorities have changed, it's like, the physical results are great to see. That's, why everybody kind of does it in the first place, is because there's some frustration there and they want to see the aesthetic changes. But so much about fitness can change so many areas of your life, and she's seen all of those, which is really, really cool. So give her a little shout out. Great job. You're doing awesome. And the secret is to just keep going, right? Never stop. And never do Pilates. All right, let's talk about this topic. So I hear all the time from people, and they're like, "Oh, I'm thinking about doing Pilates," or they'll come in for a consultation, and they'll meet with me, and they're like, "Well, I'm really I wanted to see what your program was about because I'm thinking about doing this, or I'm considering doing Pilates," and I just want to slam my head against the table, because I know that you probably wouldn't believe this if you regularly listen to this podcast, but I hate beating up on other types of fitness programs, because in the big scheme of things, right? Like if somebody's working out and physically active, that's a huge win, right? I would much rather that than somebody sit on the couch and do absolutely nothing. However, I do knock so many different things because there's just so many gimmicks and so many false advertisements and ideas around what something will do for you. And I think Pilates is great in its own right. I want to say that, but we've always talked about on this podcast, like, you have to go back to your why. Why are you trying to, or what are you trying to accomplish? And is the thing that you're going to do moving you closer to that goal? And I think, if your primary goal is to lose body fat, there are a lot of other things that we would recommend you do besides just Pilates. So, Brandy, I want to go to you because Joe Pilates, right? The inventor of Pilates, a guy,
right?
But I also feel like Pilates is more of like a predominantly women. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I want to get your take on like the concept and the system that Pilates is.
Yeah. So my perspective, I'll start with saying I have not taken a full-blown like Pilates class using a reformer into all of that. So I have not done that. I have, however, taken some ballet-inspired Pilates classes. Growing up, I was a ballet dancer all the way through college on point, and we did take some Pilates classes through ballet. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I felt good. but I did not see any body composition changes through doing Pilates like I have seen through lifting weights. It's a completely different style. In Pilates, it's a lot of it is ballet inspired. You're doing body weight or very low weight, maybe 3 to 5 pound dumbbells, many reps. Not engaging your body like you do with weight training. So you're not going to see the body composition training changes that you would through lifting weights.
And that was, I guess, the initial movement of Pilates, like early 1900s, was directed towards dancers, right? And ballet and Joe Pilates was a salesman, and he basically had this system that he created, and he sold it as like, hey, if you're a dancer and you're injured and you've got these things going on, then you do my specific workout. And it was like, I can't remember now, 20 or 30 exercises, and you just did them in this sequence, and that was like his system.
Yeah.
And then it kind of evolved from there, but really kind of directed at ballet dancers. I mean, I've never seen a fat ballet dancer before, right? So it wasn't like wasn't like his target audience was people that were overweight and coming in to like really see this transformation in this fat loss.
Right.
It was like, hey, you're already a stick thin ballet dancer who's got some injuries or alignment issues. And this system that I created is going to help with that.
Right.
A
lot of focus on breath work as well. So,
yeah. So, Zach, Brandy. So, you're smiling. I'm excited to get your take on this. But Brandy also mentioned like the high rep thing, right? So, I want you to kind of lay out your initial thoughts on Pilates, and then I want you to touch on that because that's from a scientific standpoint.
So like my initial like stance on it in general, like of course, like we already touched on, like it's better than nothing, but like the only like the drawback comes like if you ask me to compare, right? Oh, like yeah, if you're gonna do Pilates, it's better than nothing. But if you're gonna say, oh, it's better for fat loss than weightlifting, which would obviously be the number one tool for fat loss, then that's where like that's when I start rolling my eyes and things like that. So like I laughed earlier when Brandy was talking, or smiled, because when she said about like, 3 to 5 pound dumbbells, and like it reminded me I got in like an argument ish with my mother like however many months ago when I found out she was doing Pilates, because she mentioned something about a 1 pound dumbbell, and I'm like, okay, that tells me everything I need to know.
Were you
like,
shocked that they even made 1 pound dumbbells?
I'm like, what could we do with 1 pound dumbbell that's gonna be significant versus body weight? But anyway, so like we know, we know if you want to lose fat, you have to build lean muscle tissue. Like it helps stimulate like burning fat, increasing metabolism, things like that. So like it's funny like to joke about it, but like if you really are doing things that are 1 pound, 3 pound, 5 pound dumbbells, like body weight exercises are great. But if your goal like is to lose fat, those things aren't going to do it. And like we talked about, like ballet dancers were basically his like population. Like it's not a representative population like to like show like, oh, this is a proof of concept, because that's like if you're training people who are like already like advanced athletes, like they're not gonna like, that's gonna show nothing. They were already like ballet dancers are strong, like strong and already lean. So like they were never, it wasn't gonna show much like proof of concept on there. The high rep count, like there's nothing wrong with volume, but like to such a high degree, it obviously means weight needs to be completely negligible if there's any weight at all. And it's just like, it's a great, like if you're kind of like going through the motions, because that's kind of what you have to do. If you're doing onwards of 20 plus reps, like the weight would have to be, if you're using weight at all, has to be so dropped, which just means usually when the weight drops significantly, like past that point, the intensity completely drops as well. So like, it's just not going to be something that's going to stimulate any sort of like increased like bone density, like lean muscle tissue growth, anything like that. So we need
the exercises, kind of the foundational exercises of Pilates are very much so how we structure our warm-ups, like our initial, when somebody comes in, you know, we're spending 10, 15 minutes in this initial what we call movement prep. And a lot of corrective exercises are kind of just built into that as a default, to keep people healthy, to keep them moving well, to keep them in alignment, which is what, you know, Pilates kind of claims to do, or the idea of the system is. And I don't know if that was like, it was created that way, or that was just an afterthought of like, hey, this helps with this. But all the exercises that you would do in like a Pilates class, we're implementing all of those into our warm up, because they're really just like body weight corrective exercises, glute bridges, you know, rollouts, like there's a lot of core work and stuff built into it. So, it's like, yeah, if you think about that, we're not going to spend an hour doing those movements. I don't know how long a Pilates class is. I would imagine like 45, 50 minutes, right?
Probably.
So we're going to spend 10, 15 minutes, knock those out, get the benefit from those, and then we're going to go lift weights, and we're going to get the benefit from that. And we're going to build the bone density. We're going to build the lean muscle mass. You're going to be working a lot harder and moving weight, which is going to cause increased calorie burn. So even from a fat loss perspective, I would tell people, and I'm not a big fan of cardio, but I would even tell them like, hey, if your main objective is to burn calories, like Pilates is going to have a very low calorie burn, because you're just like sitting on the ground, laying on the ground, like you're not up. Just go run or something, you know? I mean, if that's the reason why behind it.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of core work too, like built into Pilates. And I think core work usually goes hand in hand with people, like their like rate of perceived exertion, like how hard they feel like they're working. So like it's more abs. It's not really necessarily too much core work. It's more ab work, but stuff like that. Like I've heard from some of our clients who have done Pilates, they're like, oh, it's fantastic, super like hard like core work and stuff like that, which is necessary, of course. Like real core work is necessary outside of just training your abs, but I think stuff like that is because it's such a like an intense burn, like if you're really doing some like hard ab stuff and stuff like that, and people love that for a lot of the stuff we've talked about,
the
like
perceived effort,
right? Like it feels like it's really bad, and they also think like, oh, that's burning their stomach fat or whatever it may be, you know. So it's very easy to misconstrue what it's doing.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I wanted to hit on is like the target training, right? So we've talked about it. I mean, research shows like there is no such thing as target training. Like you can't. There's no fat training exercise, right? We mentioned that last week or 2 weeks ago, but you know, Pilates, it's like, okay, I'm going to get in this specific position and I'm going to do this exercise for 30, 40, 50 reps or 60 seconds or whatever it ends up being. And like you have to be careful about putting people in specific positions that their body's not capable of. Right. So it's not like there needs to be a tailored, customized approach to that for your specific body, right? And where you're at right now. And then if I put you in a position and I repeat that motion repetitively for that many reps, like most likely your body is going to have some sort of compensatory effect from that. And you're going to have a back injury, you're going to have a hip injury, whatever. You can't just go and jump in a class and then, you know, expect your body to be able to do that. Like if you put me in a position where my leg is externally rotated and I have to lift my leg up off the ground, my hip will spasm and cramp within 3 reps. Mm-hmm. I'm just not capable of doing that motion, right? And so that's me, right? And a lot of the exercises that you see in Pilates, it's like we do those same exact exercises or same exact movement patterns, but we put people in a safe position to do it, and we're using equipment so that we can tailor the difficulty of that to match the number of reps that they should be doing and all that. So it's give and take, right? It's give and take. So
yeah, and you mentioned the core benefit to Pilates. I think you can get just as good, if not better, core benefits from lifting weights, especially if you're really focused on engaging your core as you're going through your workout with the trainers here. You're going to get that effect that you would get from a Pilates core workout through weight training, even from, just doing squats and deadlifts and bent over rows. If you're truly engaging your core the way that, we're teaching you to, you're going to get that core benefit.
Yeah. And I guess for anybody out there that's listening and maybe they do Pilates or maybe they're thinking about doing Pilates, I want to say, like, really think about the reason why. And any activity you do, whether it's personal training, whether it's a yoga class, a Pilates class, a bar class. Don't get me started on bar, which is basically kind of the same thing, right? But you're going to invest a certain amount of money into that, right? And wouldn't you want a program that's going to cover all of the bases, as opposed to just focusing on one little thing? Like, for me, I'm all about efficiency and I want the most bang for my buck, right? And so when I go out on the training floor, there's like a hierarchy of exercises that I'm going to do and I'm going to follow so that I can get the most bang for my buck out of my workout and it's the most efficient. And so from a program perspective for somebody, it's like, if I'm trying to lose weight and I've got this goal, like, I'm going to invest some money, I want to do the thing that's going to be like, it's going to make the biggest dent, right? And I'm not going to go after the smallest thing.
Yeah.
And then, so there's that element of it. And then along that same thought process, we finish our exercises, like we start and finish with more isolated movements when we're really focusing on putting in work and effort. Like, we're using as many muscles at one time as we possibly can, because that's where the benefit is going to be, till we're fatigued, and then we go to the isolated movements. And it's like, if all you're doing is focusing on the isolated movements, you're not going to see as good of results, especially from a weight loss perspective or a muscle mass increase perspective.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would say what we talked about a couple minutes ago about like doing such of the high reps like crazy. I know a lot of people get very worried about like thinking they're going to get injured, like lifting weights, like too heavy a weight. But like most injury stuff comes from like high volume and repetition stuff.
Overuse.
Yeah. And so like most people throughout their daily lives, whatever they're doing, they probably don't need more isolated high repetition in a certain fixed plane like that. And especially like if you are in a fixed movement and you're doing a ton of reps, like even if you're like whoever your instructor is in that Pilates class or whatever it is, starts you like in the right thing, like as you get fatigued, your form breaks down. We see that in regular weightlifting. So like it's easy to keep track of that, and you think like, oh, the risk is lower because there's no weight. But outside of people dropping weights on themselves, the weight doesn't usually cause any sort of injuries. It's just improper form. So if you're doing something like 60 times, if like my legs are strong, if I go out there and do 60 body weight squats, it's still going to get really hard fast. So it's very easy to like some minor thing you might have changed without realizing it throughout that long, massive like time that you're working. And without, even if if it goes uncorrected, you're just hammering away on that's something that maybe wouldn't have done anything. If you do it 40 times, it's like, it's going to cause some problems. And it's just like high volume like that elicits more fatigue. Like that's like in our volume phase of training, that's when our members get the most sore. It's like, it's not quite the same thing, of course, because it's 20 reps versus 60, right. But that's just like goes right back to like feeling like we're doing much more than we are, because we did 60 of one thing in a fixed motion. So there's no room for like accommodation or anything like that. You just have to push or do whatever you're doing in that one motion. It's going to make you feel like you're doing a ton of stuff. And if you do something wrong, that injury is going to be worse because it's magnified, just like soreness would be magnified.
Yeah.
I know like one of our members, she said a couple of weeks ago, she's like, oh, I used to do Pilates. It was awesome. I loved it. She's like, till I hurt my shoulder. And that was like months and months and months ago. It's still messed up because while she wasn't doing something under serious load, she probably did it over and over and over again, multiple classes without realizing it. So when it got bad, like she really screwed it up. So it's just like, yeah, there might be no weight or whatever it is, but in most cases, like you're probably in more higher risk, at least, of messing something up.
And that kind of leads to another thought, which is a lot of people think like, hey, I'm going to start with this and then I'm going to transition into a different type of program. And they think like they're laying the foundation. So a lot of times people, walking is a very common one that you hear, like, hey, I'm going to start walking. And then I'm going to progress to something else. Or you hear the Pilates thing or the yoga thing, like, hey, I think I'm going to start with, doing Pilates or yoga 2-3 times a week and get this foundation in place. And then I'm going to start moving on to the next thing. And it's like, you really need, if you're brand new to anything, right, you're going to need some coaching in order to do it right. And if you're in a big class environment, the odds of the instructor, the coach, being able to keep eyes on you all the time and make sure you're doing everything correctly, it's probably slim, right? They're not gonna notice every single flaw. And so you got to be careful. Like people, I want you to dive in. I want you to do something. I want you to take action. But at the same time, like, you also want to protect your body, right? And it's very important to lay the foundation, but there's different ways of doing that. When somebody comes into us and they've never worked out before, it's not like we're throwing a bar on their back and we're like, yeah, go do some squats or, some sort of CrossFit exercise that you've seen. Like, it's starting from square one and building you up. But we're teaching you how to properly control your body and perform these movements so that sooner rather than later, you can progress and you can start seeing results. Mm-hmm. So, and that's go ahead.
I would just say for the foundation thing, like, it depends on, like, if your goal is you ultimately eventually want to be where you are lifting weights regularly and stuff like that, that's where you need to start. Like, your foundation needs to be in, like, learning those movements right off the bat. Like, going to something like yoga or Pilates, people do stuff like that, like, as a foundation, because it's less intimidating. And they think like, oh, I can just do this, and it's some form of exercise. And of course, it's better than nothing, but that gives you a foundation for being able to do more advanced Pilates or yoga. It doesn't give you a foundation to be able to lift weights. Yeah. It's not the same movements. Like, if you came to, like, us right off the bat, you're like, I've never once stepped foot inside of a gym. Like, you will get to lifting way faster if you start there versus, oh, I'm just going to do some sort of, like, lower difficulty level exercise from some other, like, exercise modality than if you just start in that gym and learn all of those things right off the bat, because you're also you don't have to, like, unlearn some of the things you might have done wrong somewhere else. Like, if my goal is I want to be able to do whatever, the most advanced lifting exercises, you just start at the very lowest regression of that exercise, learn how to use your body, then learn how to use your body with some sort of load, and we gradually increase you to where you want to be. It's just like a foundation. Like, sure, if your goal is just, oh, I just want to exercise, then yeah, that's a good foundation because it's some form of exercise. But if your goal is I want to be able to lift weights or I want to lose fat, then you need to start exactly at the lowest level of where you want to be eventually, not start somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, I also think of it as, I'm someone who, I like to do all the things. I like strength training. I like to do other things too. I'm, running and hiking and cycling, and I've done yoga and, all these other things. But I really think of, like you were saying, strength training is the foundation, or if you think of like your plate, it's the entree, and you'll be stronger. It'll allow you to be stronger to do all the other things that you enjoy or like to do. So I think of strength training as like my entree, and then, if I want to go for a hike or go for a run or whatever the other thing is, it's like the side. So in addition to the strength training, but the strength training really builds your muscle, builds your capacity to be able to do other things.
Yeah, absolutely. So if your goal is fat loss, then you probably, at least from a standalone perspective, Pilates is not the solution for you. It can be one element of a program, but it can't be the program. And so on our next episode, that's what we're going to talk about, is like a holistic approach to your fitness program. But that's one thing that I want to drill into people's heads is a properly designed strength training, weight training program can be a standalone program. Yep. All the other things by themselves cannot. Right. And so you can add other things in and mix it in. But if you're just looking for like one solution, then you need a weight training program.
Agree.
Yep.
So, all right, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with you next week with more great stuff. Thank you so much for listening to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. Do you have a question that you'd like for us to answer live on the podcast? If so, all you need to do is head over to the Apple Podcast app on your iPhone and do 3 simple things. First, leave us a rating and review telling me what you think of the podcast. In that review, ask anything you want related to health, fitness, or nutrition. And if you want a shout out, leave us your Instagram handle or name. That's all you have to do. Then listen to hear your questions answered live on the next Q&A episode.